This is the final event recap video for Poland, round 6 of Drift Masters. When we arrived in Poland, I must say this was probably the smoothest flight. We used Polish Airlines LOT, or LOT. Great food, good movies, had lots of legroom, so recommend that for sure. One of the best experiences so far, because every time it's been a pain in the butt. This round was a little bit different because we had the entire family basically, only missing my girlfriend and my one brother. The event started with some minor issues with the car in the first practice, so let's go over that. When I first got in the car, out to practice, in the rain, I'm quite confident. I drive in the rain a lot. I drive in the snow and on the ice. So honestly, there was no issues when Drift Masters decided to wet the track based on how the weather was going to react. The reason the track was wet was because the rain that was coming on the weekend, Saturday, was going to come no matter what. They cannot have the roof closed if it is dry because it will create too much smoke, set off the fire alarms, and no one will be able to breathe. So the only options are roof open, which would have left all of Friday dry, qualifying in the dry. There would have been smoke, but what's more important is that rubber would have been laid down on the track. If there's rubber on the track, this essentially is a glass or ice layer. When water sits on top of this rubber, it becomes more slippery than ice. So they made the decision to wet the track with the water truck all day Friday, all day Saturday, keeping the roof closed so that the elements, the weather, did not add the water after a bunch of rubber would have been laid down on Friday. So I hope that makes sense. They made the call. A lot of people were not happy. Some people were like, I think it's a good idea. All in all, it was a great idea, and it did end up working because no rubber was laid down and it stayed fairly consistent. I use that term quite loosely because it was still quite inconsistent, but that's the best. We had the best case scenario for a wet track. Basically, the first couple laps, it was undrivable, the car. The reason it was undrivable was like kind of unknown. It was like several things going on in my mind. So I knew that it had to do with a bit of slack in the throttle cable and then way too sensitive of throttle input. So basically where the cable connects to the throttle body and how the gas pedal actuates, it was way too sensitive. Essentially the throw of the pedal was so short that I couldn't find a fine-tuned spot on the throttle position. This was difficult because of how slippery it was when I was giving the car gas. I wanted to increase my wheel speed just slightly to maintain the line, but it would instantly go to limiter just with like a 5% pressure, and it was really hard to control. So basically we did something with the sway bars first, and then we made a throttle adjustment where we raised to the point that the cable connects to the actual throttle bracket, and this gave us more leverage and slowed the ratio down on the pedal so that I could push the pedal much further and it would do a lot less, and I was able to really fine-tune the throttle, which controls the entire rear of the car in the wet because there is no traction. We stuck with the 265 Valinos, which did well. They were quite consistent in the rain. We put new fronts on. The fronts that I had on were only 2 rounds deep, but they had quite a bit of rubber buildup on them, so I scrubbed those off. Still, zero traction, so we put brand new Valinos on the front, and that made a huge difference, which was like crazy to feel the difference of like a pretty new tire with like an event on it versus a brand new tire. The ones with the event on it had no traction. The ones that were brand new had a ton of traction. So that was a huge improvement. I was basically unable to feel the steering, where when we put the new tires on, it was self-steering and doing everything nicely, as well as the throttle and the sway bar adjustment. That's pretty much all we did. And then we left the car for the entire event. We never touched it since then. We ran the same pressures and everything the whole time. Whether the water truck came out or whether it didn't, we just kept it the same. So after the second practice session, the car was like probably 5 times better than it was in the first one. It was actually drivable and everything. So basically we got 1 run in the morning and then we got 2 runs in the afternoon. So we're sitting at 6 runs total before going into qualifying. 6 laps. When I say you go out and you do a lead and then you do a chase. So that's 1. Basically I did that 3 times. So I was on the track for a total of 3 minutes and 21 seconds, let's say. And then we do qualifying. So what you guys watched live was what 3 minutes of practice was. Let that sink in for a second. 3 minutes of practice before the qualifying run is what you guys witnessed. So going into qualifying, run number 1, we scored a 72. The track was the driest that it could possibly be because they sent the water truck out right after me. So the track being that dry meant that there was a bunch of grip and patchy spots. So on my initiation, the car actually gripped up slightly when I threw it towards the wall, so it did a weird step. Okay, whatever, drive through. It was a pretty good initiation. Zone 1 was okay. Came off of zone 1 and like cut off the inner zone 2, which was something that the judges really didn't want you to do because it would cut off the chase car in battles. So this was due to the grip. So then going, the track is just way grippier than I had ever driven it yet. So all of these mistakes were pretty much because I hadn't driven the track this grippy yet. And we patched together a run that was essentially I was not happy with, and it ended up being a 72, and I knew we needed to improve on that. The 72 would have been like 46th position. Going into the second run, we didn't really change anything other than mentality and being aware of when the water truck was going. So out for the second run, waiting in the pits. Basically, I had a very strong voice in my mind to not handbrake at inner clip 3 and to do a couple things differently. And I was like, I have never tried that yet. I've only done now a total of 7 laps. The first batch of runs were basically not practice at all because of the throttle and stuff. So really we're going into this with, like I said, 3 minutes. Don't handbrake at the transition is what's going through my mind. I'm waiting in line and I see the water truck drive out, not really realizing is this a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just taking it how it is. And when I drive out on the track, it's completely soaked. The water truck just freshly dumped all of its water. And as I'm warming up my tires, I get my helmet covered in water. I remembered to turn on my wipers, luckily, because I forgot the first run, remembered the second run. So the wipers are going, helmet's covered in water. I give the helmet a little wipe with my glove and basically I can't see anything at all. It smeared it a bunch. The boys from Latvia, before I drove out, and kind of while I was driving out, they played Highway to Hell, the intro basically, in the headset, which it did relax me because it was like a nice intro beat. I know everyone knows the beginning of that song. So I'm warming up my tires, they're laughing. Basically nothing really matters at this point. I know the 72 is trash. I know I have to give it a full 100% run. So I can't see, whatever. Sent the car into the wall, first transition, and yeah, she was slick. She was quite slick, and I just kept in it, kept the speed. I told myself, remove the corners of the bumper off the car and remove the front bumper off the car on the inner zone 3. And we pretty much did just that. I think that the only issues with that run would have been maybe this much deeper in zone. So it would be after inner zone 3 to inner zone 4, got into it nice. And I remember the gap where you drive through. It actually caught me off guard because I thought I was a bit deeper than I was. So I lifted just for a slight second and it put me about a foot or 30 centimeters off the wall. And then I kind of gained it back slowly. So I think that was like probably the biggest mistake. And then transitioning from 4 through 5 and then into 6, everything there was pretty good. And then 6 was great. And I just threw a bunch of angle right at the last corner so that I didn't go into the wall too hard and it looked great. So that run was really well put together, really nice, and it was all for fun, carefree, trusting that I just needed to trust the instincts of driving and go for it, and that's kind of what happened. I just let the instincts take over. So moving on from that, we had a big high, everyone's excited, we placed low 20s, and we were put up against Kevin Piscolti for the next day. He's a great driver, so I knew everything would be good there. The next day was focusing on getting practice time. So when we lined up the car about an hour and a half early, there was already 22 cars in line, maybe 20. Some of them lined up at 7 a.m. that morning, so that was crazy, but we were definitely near the front, just outside of the tunnel, in one single line. Now what happened next, we went to the driver's meeting, and when we came back, there was an entirely second line formed beside the first line. And what they ended up doing was letting the cars go 2 at a time into the tunnel, which they were doing arguably the day before. I don't know why I thought, like, because everyone had already started a single file line, I thought we just should go in there. This is a good lesson for you guys to not follow the status quo. Don't follow people if they're forming lines in the airport and doing weird things, because I never do that. Don't just do what everyone else is doing, because question your own mind. I should have started the second line. Everyone that started in that second line got 2 practice runs. And me, I was 1 car away from not getting a second practice run. So I only got 1 practice. And going into battles, including qualifying, we have a total number of laps, 10. 10 laps. Only one of them being a chase. So going into the battles, as you can imagine, Piscolti was known to be fast. He was running the Velino SP tires, which I wasn't able to get. That's a rain-specific Velino tire. I was just running the standard 265, so he had 285 SP. So obviously there's going to be a difference in rain grip and stuff. So I knew I just needed to get on him quickly. That's literally what was in my mind, was do not let him get any distance on you, because he has the better tire and he has a few more laps and he's obviously a veteran of the sport and all these other things. I had the odds against me. So going into that battle, that was on my mind, kind of on repeat. And basically I did the same entry on Churba in practice. It worked really well. Like, I did a good lead and chase with Churba, and my spotter was like, if that was a battle that was really close, you might have even taken it if that was like an actual practice was a battle. So that gave me a little bit of confidence, and I just did the same approach. And then I remember driving up to behind Piscolti, I was pedaling the car because like it was quite fast. And he was doing a very large Manji in front of me. Basically tried to time the dive in to be on handbrake, kind of sliding up to him, waiting for him to light off, and then I would go. And essentially I never got to that point because I actually caught his rear bumper on the sweep. Yeah, talking to the team, my spotter, Maurice, talked to their team. He said that he actually caught some grip there, and that's why he was probably 3 meters away from the wall when that all happened. Because I was fairly inside, as in a chase lane, to make that dive. I want him to swing wide into the zone, and then I want to make the dive on that pocket. And I've done it a million times in other scenarios and other events and other things. And this was simply just a mistimed mistake based on not enough practice and kind of experience and all these other things playing into it. Really, really beating myself up over this for the entire flight home, the entire next day, the entire everything. Like, you can really occupy your mind with a lot of negative space if you do this to yourself, and I did do it to myself for sure, because I was like, even if I had lost, I just wanted to get the battle in. And not being able to have that to recall on or to remember really, really sucked, to put it simply. Basically, the qualifying was the high of the weekend. So if I was going to take anything away from this, it would be like, you must have some kind of a method of staying sharp and fresh in the pits or something, because doing a total of probably, with the runs with Churba in practice, 4 minutes of driving, and you think of the cost to get there and all of the time invested, the family, everyone's there. To drive for 4 minutes is like absolutely insane. And yeah, it's an exhilarating 4 minutes with the fans. Qualifying had 23,000 people watching, and then the actual show was 50,000. So there was still a lot of people watching qualifying live. And then online, there was 50,000 people watching qualifying. It was crazy. So really, to put that all into perspective, it is so difficult for these drivers. Like, there were top tier drivers that didn't qualify this round. Top tier. Some guys are finishing top 4, top 8 every round that didn't qualify. So yes, there is a win in making the top 32, especially with a fairly decent score, not just scraping by. So that is definitely a high to take away, but really can't really get out of the mindset of beating myself up over how it ended with everything. So that's kind of the review of the event as it happened. The end of the event was great. We got with family, we explored, we went to the salt mines of Krakow in Poland, and then we drove to the Auschwitz concentration camp, which was the World War II concentration camp. So we did some crazy things that was definitely worth the trip. Poland is an amazing place. Like I said, even the flight home was good. So I really don't have that many negatives to take away other than thinking on repeat what I should have done differently. I should have given him space. I should have allowed that to happen. I should have enabled myself to lose a little bit of distance on the entry and then make up for it right after, because when you consider the fact that you only get a minimal amount of practice, you're gonna have to make sacrifices at the expense of not knowing how to react in those certain situations. So I should have made a calculated decision of giving that space where I was unsure and then making up for it where I was sure, which is like basically any time after initiation during those sweeping corners, you can adjust line, angle, you can modulate the throttle to get proximity again. So I really was quite confident that I would have done a very good chase, and then the leads were getting so much better, like literally twice as good every run that I did. And like I told you guys, I only did 10 total. So you can imagine how bad the first one was and how good the last one was. I was actually no handbrake transitioning through the 5 to 6, which nobody was doing, and it worked really well against Churba. The guys were like, that was such a nice transition through the middle. You would have really been rewarded for that commitment. So I'm really disappointed that I didn't get to try that in the battles, and it's defeating. It's super defeating. So with all of that said, thank you guys for listening to me ramble on about this. Thank you guys for always watching these recap videos. They oftentimes do as good or better than the original videos because it's a lot more detail. And from now on, we're just gonna focus on building the car out in the shop, building the channel, doing some innovative things and growing the company and staying relevant in all aspects, and continue to make what the whole reason for this is the best product for you guys. That is the end of this Drift Masters season. Thank you guys for all the support, and we'll see you guys in the next one.